In the scorched plains of South Africa, where mankind's intervention has forever altered the natural order, one lion defied all odds. Tembe wasn't just a survivor, he became the architect of renewal, plucked from his homeland and thrust into a decimated reserve. He faced a war against a formidable rival, the unforgiving wild and the ticking clock of extinction. His roars across the savannah weren't merely territorial warnings, they were the echoes of nature's resilience. As his golden eyes surveyed the kingdom he fought to build, Tembe carried more than battle scars. He bore the future of an entire species on his scarred shoulders. This is the true story of how one lion's journey became the salvation of Welgevonden in a game of thrones where the stakes weren't crowns, but survival itself. The savannas of South Africa stretched for miles, golden under the relentless sun. In Welgevonden Game Reserve, located in Limpopo province, 36,000 hectares of land housed the perfect wild balance. The Big Five, lion, leopard, elephant, rhinoceros, and buffalo, roamed freely between the plains and rolling hills. Herds of antelopes grazed in relative peace, always vigilant, while predators patiently waited for the next hunting opportunity. At the top of the food chain reigned the lion, the true king of the savannah. The prides controlled their territories with roars that echoed across the plains, marking invisible boundaries that all other animals instinctively recognized. The dominant males, with their imposing manes, ensured the survival of their families and the continuity of their genetic legacy. This was the perfect world, the natural cycle of life that had been maintained for generations. Each species in its place, each predator and prey, in an ancestral dance that maintained the balance of the ecosystem. The lions were not just magnificent predators, but essential components of this delicate balance, controlling populations of other species and maintaining the health of the entire ecosystem through their presence. In Welgevonden, the lions were divided into several prides, each controlling its territory with fierce determination. Their golden bodies moved like liquid silk through the tall grass, their roars marking the dawn and dusk. Tourists from around the world traveled to witness these majestic creatures in their natural habitat, their cameras ready to capture a glimpse of wild royalty. In 2015, an invisible and deadly enemy infiltrated the lands of Welgevonden, a virulent outbreak of Canine, distemper. This virus, which attacks the gastrointestinal, respiratory and neurological systems, did not distinguish between easy prey and powerful predators. The southern prides and western lions were the first to feel its devastating effects. One after another, the lions began to succumb to the disease. Their roars, once powerful, became weak moans of pain. Their paws, once firm in pursuit, now could barely support their weakened bodies. Their eyes, once alert and penetrating, now showed only the reflection of approaching death. The lion population, once majestic and feared, was practically decimated. Only one solitary lioness survived the outbreak, wandering through the empty territories that once echoed with the roars of her companions. The savannah had lost its kings, and the natural balance was irreparably disturbed. As the weeks passed, the absence of lions began to affect the entire ecosystem. Other predators, such as hyenas and leopards, began to change their behaviors without the competition from the lions. Herbivore populations started to grow unchecked, putting pressure on vegetation. The delicate balance that had existed for centuries was threatening to collapse. The rangers and wildlife managers of Welgevonden observed this unfolding ecological crisis with growing concern. It was clear that without intervention, the reserve's biodiversity would suffer long-term damage. A solution was needed. The lions had to return to Welgevonden. Far away, in different reserves of South Africa, two young lions developed unaware of Welgevonden's tragedy. In Tembe Elephant Park in northern Natal, young Tembe, born in February 2012, grew strong and healthy. With his predominantly yellowish mane and dark fringes near the neck, he already showed signs that he would be a formidable dominant male. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that YouTube can understand and deliver more of our content to you. Simultaneously in Welgevonden itself, before the distemper outbreak, a cub was born in April 2010 who would come to be known as Dino King. When he turned 2 years old, as part of a management program that mimicked the natural dispersion of young male lions, he was transferred to Dino King Reserve, far from his native territory. Both lived their lives as apex predators, establishing themselves in their respective areas, hunting, patrolling, and learning the complexities of survival in the Savannah. They were protected in the bubbles of their own worlds, unaware of the destiny that awaited them. Tembe had established himself as a promising young leader in Tembe Elephant Park. His territory, while not vast, provided everything he needed. Prey was abundant, water accessible, and competition minimal. There was no reason for him to leave. His instincts, honed over millions of years of evolution, told him to stay where conditions were favorable, to defend what he had rather than risk the unknown. Similarly, Dino King had adapted well to his new home in Dino King Reserve. Having been relocated once already, he had overcome the challenges of establishing himself in foreign territory. His body bore the scars of battles won, his reputation among the local wildlife firmly established. The idea of another move, another upheaval, would have been against every natural instinct he possessed. In 2016, Welgevonden's wildlife managers knew they needed to restore the lion population. It wasn't just a matter of attracting tourists, although lions were indeed a favorite attraction, but also of restoring ecological balance. Without lions, other predators could multiply uncontrollably, affecting the entire food chain. Dr. Anton Mbengi, a biologist specializing in big cats, was called to oversee the process. With decades of experience in predator reintroduction, he had witnessed both successes and failures of these delicate operations. The Savannah needs its kings, he explained to the forest rangers as they observed the solitary lioness from afar. But we can't just bring in any lion. We need males young enough for adaptation, but mature enough to establish dominance. We need diverse genetics to avoid inbreeding. And above all, we need lions that can not only survive, but thrive in Welgevonden's specific conditions. After months of careful planning, Dr. Mbengi identified the perfect candidates. Among them, 2 lions stood out: Tembe from Tembe Elephant Park and Dino King, who would return to his birthplace after years in the namesake reserve. These 2, said Dr. Mbengi, pointing to the photographs, will be the patriarchs who will rebuild the lion dynasties we lost. But I must warn you, when 2 dominant males share a territory, blood will inevitably be spilled. The team meticulously planned every detail of the reintroduction. They studied the hunting patterns of the surviving lioness and identified the most suitable areas for release. They prepared tranquilization protocols, arranged for specialized transport, and set up temporary acclimatization enclosures. Every contingency was considered, every risk assessed. The future of Welgevonden's lion population, and by extension, the health of the entire ecosystem, depended on getting this right. For Tembe, the crossing began in July 2016. Sedated and transported in a special cage, he was taken to Welgevonden. The truck shook on the red dirt road, raising dust that stained the blue sky. Inside the cage, the young lion slept, unaware of the drastic changes that his life would undergo. Upon arrival, he was temporarily placed in an acclimatization enclosure. It was the first time he had stepped outside his native territory, and the smells, sounds, even the texture of the earth under his paws were different. Everything was strange, threatening. Just 1 day later, the doors of the enclosure were opened. Tembe hesitated initially, sniffing the unfamiliar air. Then, with cautious steps, he crossed the threshold between temporary captivity and his new home. Before him stretched a vast and unexplored territory, filled with promises and dangers. As he crossed this invisible border, Tembe wasn't just entering new physical lands. He was entering a new chapter of his existence, one where he would be called to fulfill a destiny greater than himself, to restore the lost balance of an entire ecosystem. His first steps into Welgevonden were tentative, his powerful muscles tense with alertness. Every sense was heightened. The unfamiliar scents of new plant species, the distant calls of animals he had never encountered, the very taste of the air different from what he had known. The vast expanse of territory stretched before him, both intimidating and exhilarating. With each step further from the enclosure, Tembe was not just exploring a new landscape, but transforming into the lion he was destined to become, the future king of Welgevonden. Tembe wasted no time. Exploring his new territory with relentless determination, he covered impressive distances, up to 50 kilometers in a single night of patrol. His presence was felt in all northern, central, and western parts of the reserve. With no other dominant males nearby, he quickly established his dominance. The surviving females of the reserve, including the only lioness who had resisted the distemper outbreak, found in Tembe the partner they so desperately needed. Soon, cubs began to be born, carrying the strong genes of the new king. Some of the reserve's guardians, initially skeptical about the success of the reintroduction, became allies, admiring the adaptability and vigor of the newcomer. However, new challenges constantly arose. Poachers occasionally invaded the reserve, posing a threat not only to rhinoceroses, but to all local fauna. Tembe had tense encounters with groups of hyenas, which tested the limits of his territory and his determination. In 2017, a year after Tembe's arrival, Dino King returned to Welgevonden. Larger and with a thicker, darker mane, he carried an air of wild nobility. His return was not accidental. It was part of the same plan to restore the lion population, but it introduced a new variable into the equation: competition. The reserve, once empty of male lions, now housed two powerful contenders. Tembe had established his domain and wasn't about to relinquish what he had fought to claim. The landscape of Welgevonden would become the stage for a power struggle of epic proportions, a real-life Game of Thrones with the future of the lion population hanging in the balance. The inevitable encounter between Tembe and Dino King occurred in the southern regions of the reserve. Tembe had ventured beyond his usual territory, perhaps following the trail of prey, when he sensed a familiar but threatening smell. Another adult male. Dino King, in turn, immediately recognized the intrusion. Although he was returning to his native land, the years away had erased any familiarity. For him, Tembe was simply a potential invader, a threat to his newly reclaimed position. The first confrontation was brief but intense. Powerful roars echoed across the savannah as the two titans evaluated each other. There was no physical combat in this first encounter, just a demonstration of strength and determination. Tembe, realizing he had met a worthy adversary, strategically retreated, pursued by Dino King for several hours. This first encounter set the tone for what would become one of the most remarkable feline rivalries ever documented in Welgevonden. An invisible border began to form, with the Sterkstrom River Valley serving as the dividing line between the two kingdoms. To the north reigned Tembe. To the south, Dino King established his dominance. The days following their initial clash were tense. Both males patrolled their territories relentlessly, roaring more frequently than usual, marking boundaries with scent, asserting their presence. The lionesses and other wildlife sensed the change in dynamics, the new order being established. The sounds of territorial disputes carried for miles across the savannah at night, a primal announcement that two kings now ruled where once there had been none. Rangers monitoring the situation observed both lions pushing the boundaries of their respective territories, testing the resolve of the other. They would approach the river valley, roar their defiance, then retreat. A dangerous dance of dominance performed on the edge of all-out war. In the years that followed, the tension between the two kings only grew. Their encounters became more frequent and more violent. Scars began to mark their bodies, silent witnesses to the fierce battles they waged. The forest rangers and researchers monitoring the lions compared their rivalry to a true wild Game of Thrones. Each confrontation was an explosion of brute force and strategy. Roars, bites, and powerful paw strikes filled the air as the titans fought for supremacy. On rare occasions, they were seen close to each other without immediate confrontation. In these moments, the tension was palpable. Observers described a kind of tacit truce, a mutual respect that emerged from the shared knowledge of their power. Perhaps at some primitive level, both recognized the importance of the other for the greater balance of the reserve. During these years of rivalry, both TEMBE and DINOKENG fulfilled their greater purpose. They reproduced abundantly. The prides grew, and some of the cubs were later transferred to other reserves, contributing to the genetic diversity of lions. Throughout South Africa, the population that had been devastated by distemper was finally recovering. However, age and constant battles began to take their toll. In 2022, Dino King suffered severe injuries during a confrontation. Even with careful monitoring by forest rangers, who occasionally intervened to treat serious injuries in the reserve's animals, his condition progressively deteriorated. The final battle between the two kings was witnessed by a team of researchers studying lioness hunting patterns. They described it as both terrible and magnificent, the culmination of years of territorial disputes. The confrontation lasted for hours, with neither lion willing to submit. When it finally ended, both were severely wounded, but Dino King had clearly taken the worst of it. His movements were labored, his breathing shallow, his once magnificent mane matted with blood. The researchers notified the conservation team, but it was decided not to intervene. Nature would take its course. On October 7, 2022, Dino King, the King of the South, succumbed to his injuries. His death marked the end of an era and the beginning of another. For TEMBE, it was a victory, but also the beginning of a peculiar loneliness. The rivalry that had defined him for so many years suddenly disappeared. With his main adversary gone, TEMBE expanded his territory to include the areas that previously belonged to Dino King. Now, he was the undisputed sovereign of all Welgevonden, freely patrolling from north to south. The reward for his survival and victory was absolute. Complete dominance, access to all females in the reserve, abundance of prey, and absence of significant competition. His genes now flowed through multiple generations of lions, not only in Welgevonden but in several other reserves where his descendants had been transferred. Tourists visiting the reserve frequently returned with stories and photographs of the imposing King TEMBE, easily identifiable by his unique mane and majestic presence. For wildlife managers, his success represented the validation of years of careful work in conservation and management. In the months following Dino King's death, TEMBE's behavior changed subtly. His patrols became more methodical, less frantic. The movements of a king secure in his reign, rather than a contender fighting for position. The lionesses of the southern pride, once loyal to Dino King, gradually accepted TEMBE's dominance. New cubs bearing his genetic signature were born, further cementing his legacy across the reserve. The researchers who had studied the rivalry noted something unexpected. Despite now having access to the entire reserve, TEMBE continued to respect the old boundary at the Sterkstrom River Valley for several months, as if honoring the memory of his fallen adversary. Only gradually did he begin to fully integrate both territories into his regular patrols. For 2 years after Dino King's death, TEMBE reigned supreme. However, the balance of nature demands constant renewal. In 2024, Welgevonden's biologists recognized that it was time for another transition. TEMBE, now 12 years old, an advanced age for a wild lion, began to show signs of aging. His patrols became less frequent and less extensive. Young males, some possibly his own sons, began to challenge his authority. Dr. Mbengi, who had supervised his introduction years before, returned to assess the situation. "He has fulfilled his mission magnificently," he observed, "but the cycle needs to continue. New genes must be introduced, and TEMBE deserves an ending worthy of his legend." The decision was made. TEMBE would be transferred to Tumbeta Private Game Reserve, where he could spend his remaining years in relative comfort, away from the constant pressure of defending an extensive territory against younger rivals. Preparations began quietly. A suitable area in Tumbeta was identified, one with abundant prey, water, and enough space for the aging king, but without resident males who might challenge him. A specialized veterinary team was assembled for the transfer operation. which would need to be executed with precision and care, minimizing stress for the aging lion. As the day of transfer approached, the rangers who had monitored Tembe for years found themselves experiencing unexpected emotions. This lion, once just another component in a wildlife management plan, had become something more to them, a symbol of resilience, of wild nobility, of nature's capacity for renewal. His departure would mark the end of a remarkable chapter in Welgevonden's history. While Tembe was being prepared for his final journey, a new chapter began in Welgevonden. A young 4-year-old lion named Nyasa was selected from Tumbeta Game Reserve to be introduced. Along with another unnamed male, they represented the next generation of kings. Tembe's transfer was carried out with the same care as his initial introduction. Sedated and monitored by veterinarians, he was transported to his new home where he would awaken to a less turbulent life, but still worthy of a king. In Welgevonden, Nyasa and the other new male began their own journeys. New territories would be established, new prides formed, and possibly new rivalries would be born. The eternal cycle of wildlife continued. The introduction of Nyasa was carefully planned to avoid the mistakes of the past. Unlike when TEMBE and DINOKENG were both present in the reserve, with no clear initial territories, Nyasa was first allowed to establish himself in the northern regions. The second male would be introduced later, after Nyasa had sufficient time to create his domain. This strategic staggering was designed to reduce initial conflicts and allow for more natural territory establishment. When Tembe awoke in Tumbeta, his confusion was evident but brief. Within days, his adaptive intelligence, the same quality that had helped him survive and thrive in Welgevonden, allowed him to assess his new surroundings. The territory was smaller, more manageable for his aging body. Prey was abundant, and the absence of competing males meant he could live out his remaining years with dignity. Still a king, though of a smaller realm. The legacy of Tembe and DINOKENG transcends their individual lives. Together, even in their fierce rivalry, they restored what had been lost, a healthy and genetically diverse population of lions in Welgevonden. The descendants of both now roam through various reserves in South Africa, carrying the strong genes that allowed their parents to survive and thrive in challenging conditions. Their contribution to the conservation of African lions, a species facing numerous threats throughout the continent, is invaluable. For researchers and conservationists, the story of Tembe and DINOKENG offers valuable lessons about predator reintroduction, management of big cat populations, and the importance of genetic diversity. Each observation, each field note, each DNA sample collected transformed into scientific knowledge that will benefit future conservation efforts. For visitors to Welgevonden, the stories of these two kings continue to be told by the reserve's guides. At sunset, when safaris stop to contemplate the vastness of the savannah, many swear they can still hear the echoes of Tembe and DINOKENG's roars, a reminder of the epic battle that helped restore the natural balance of that piece of wild paradise. And so in the golden savannas under the African sky, life continues its eternal course. New generations of lions grow under the protective vigilance of researchers and forest rangers, ensuring that the majesty of these magnificent predators is never lost again. An elixir of hope in a world where so many species face an uncertain future. The journey of Tembe and DINOKENG may have come to an end, but their legacy will roar across the savannas for generations to come. Their story is more than just a tale of two lions. It represents the delicate balance between human intervention and natural processes in conservation, the resilience of nature when given the chance to recover, and the profound impact that individual animals can have on entire ecosystems. In the grand narrative of African conservation, they stand as symbols of what is possible when science, dedication, and respect for wildlife come together. As night falls over Welgevonden, new roars echo across the plains, the voices of Tembe and DINOKENG's descendants, continuing the age-old song of the Savannah's kings. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that YouTube can understand and deliver more of our content to you.